Chicago is going to be next, and we'll get to St. Louis also.
And on Charlie Kirk's assassination.
And New Orleans we want to get to, too.
Your FBI is investigating the potential role of left-wing organizations in the assassination. I'm wondering if you think if Charlie Kirk's assassin worked alone or if he worked with.
I don't know. I mean, I can tell you he didn't work alone on the internet, because it seems that he became radicalized on the internet. That's just by watching same things that you're watching and hearing. It looks like he became radicalized over the internet, and it seems like he has wonderful parents, brought in a wonderful neighborhood, smart guy, great boards, great marks, great student. And then something happened to him over a fairly short period of time. It looks like he was radicalized over the internet, and it's radicalized on the left. He's a left. I have a lot of problems with the left, and they get protected, and they shouldn't be protected. But as you understand, I think, very well from the tone of your question. Thank you very much.
When he launches this mass libel of half the country, the 20-year-old man in Pennsylvania who shot at Donald Trump was a registered Republican. And the 22-year-old Utah man accused of murdering Charlie Kirk has never voted. The single most murderous American political assassin was a registered Republican.
This may be the most important video we have ever made on this channel, not because of clicks or numbers or views, but because of what it means for all of us. Right now, the truth feels unbearable, and that weight is different this time. This isn't just another headline you scroll past. Charlie Kirk's murder was already a political earthquake, a rupture that cracked through normal partisan lines and forced everyone to reckon with violence as a political tool. But the danger we face now is not only that someone died, it's that the story is being bent and sharpened into something far darker, a story that can be molded, marketed, and weaponized to justify far-reaching attacks on entire communities. Listen, narratives move faster than facts. When a powerful actor decides to redraw the shape of an event, the consequences are immediate. Entire policy debates shift. Law enforcement priorities change. Public moods harden. And the people who already live on the margins, who are most vulnerable to political violence and scapegoating, pay the price. That's why this matters more than any single tragic death, because this narrative can be turned into a tool of oppression. It can manufacture consent for policies that strip away rights, for investigations and prosecutions aimed at groups instead of individuals, for social sanctioned prejudice. That is a real, material threat. We're not being alarmist. We're being precise. New, leaked messages and law enforcement notes are circulating that complicate the easy versions of this story. Those fragments, DMs, texts, police summaries, don't exist in a vacuum. They will be read, edited, amplified, and weaponized by people with power and agenda. So what we decide to accept as truth in these first few days will echo for months and years. That's why nuance matters. That's why digging through motive, timeline, and source matters. And frankly, that's why I'm scared. Because once a false frame grabs hold, it's almost impossible to fully undo. Stay with me. We need to understand what was actually said, who said it, and why the way the story is told next could change everything. The facts are painful, and they land like blows. Within hours of the shooting, Trump, his inner circle, and a chorus of right-wing media seized a moment and turned it into a political cudgel. They didn't mourn, they framed. They didn't investigate. They indicted broad swaths of society with language and imagery meant to inflame. Overnight, a tragedy became a manufactured spectacle, billed as proof of a looming civil war and packaged as moral justification for harsher laws, broader surveillance, and open hostility toward vulnerable communities. This is not hyperbole. When leaders of enormous platforms and powerful institutions choose a story angle, they set the agenda, reporters echo it, pundits normalize it, and lawmakers feel less political risk standing behind sweeping measures. The image they painted, a so-called uprising of marginalized people rising to attack the rest of America, is not just false, it is deliberately false. It's a narrative designed to clarify an enemy where none exists, to make complex individual pathology into a communal indictment. And the consequence is chilling. Smear a group long enough, and the public begins to accept draconian policies as reasonable responses to an invented threat. We've seen the blueprint before: demonize, dehumanize, legislate, and the result is always the same: more violence, fewer rights, and and a deeper erosion of democratic norms. This lie matters because it shifts resources and attention away from where they belong, towards scapegoating organizations that provide refuge and support to people already at risk. It makes law enforcement into a blunt instrument for political theater. It gives cover to politicians who want to dismantle civil liberties under the guise of security. That is why we have to call out the manipulation, trace exactly how this narrative was assembled, and insist on a sober, evidence-based account before the lie metastasizes into policy, into persecution, into permanent damage. Now comes a terrifying part, the detail that flips this from tragedy into something almost cinematic in its danger. Leaked Discord messages, allegedly sent by Tyler Robinson, the man accused of killing Charlie Kirk, are already circulating online. One of them reads like a hammer blow. "Hey guys, I have bad news for you. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all of this." On the surface, that looks like a confession, cold and final. But in reality, it's more than words on a screen. It's a spark, an ember that powerful people are eager to fan into a political inferno. Because once those words are out there, no one's asking if they're authentic. No one's pausing to verify the context. They are rushing to weaponize. Independent journalist Ken Klippenstein was the first to publish these leaks, backing them with conversations he had with Robinson's childhood friends. And here's the thing, the picture that emerges doesn't line up with the story Trump's allies are pushing. Robinson wasn't a militant ideologue, wasn't a hardened revolutionary waiting for a moment to strike. Friends described him as quiet, outdoorsy, the type of guy who could spend hours lost in the wilderness or glued to a game console. He wasn't known for fiery political takes, or for obsessing over movements and causes. In short, he doesn't fit the mold of the caricature being painted on Fox News and in mega rallies. But here's the cruel reality. That doesn't matter. The media machine doesn't care about nuance, doesn't care about contradictions. They have the confession. They have the name, the face, the crime. And that's enough to craft a narrative that serves their purpose. Facts get flattened into slogans. Complexity is erased, and what's left is a weaponized version of Robinson, a boogeyman they can use to stir fear, inflame divisions, and justify measures that reach far beyond this single case. Then came the text with his roommate, the kind of exchanges that make your stomach drop because of how raw and unfiltered they are. The roommate, staring at the message that looked like a confession, shot back, "You're joking, right?" And Robinson's reply came quick. I'm sorry." Just 2 words of denial, just one apology, not enough to undo the weight of what he had already typed, but enough to show hesitation, enough to show the wobble between confession and retraction. The roommate, caught in that terrifying moment, was shocked. They were frightened, and within hours, they began cooperating fully with law enforcement. Every account so far makes it clear. This was someone blindsided, someone who had no idea Robinson was planning anything violent. They weren't an accomplice, weren't complicit. They did what you would hope any ordinary person would do in that impossible position. They went to the authorities. But here's where the story curdles, where the cruelty really shows itself. That roommate happens to be a transgender American, and instead of being recognized as a key witness, instead of being seen as a terrified bystander who helped police, they've been dragged into the political crossfire. Trump, Kash Patel, and a web of right-wing media outlets zeroed in not on what this person did, but on who they are. Their gender identity became the headline, the talking point, dismay. They've been painted as suspicious, complicit, even dangerous, simply for existing outside the rigid boxes of conservative politics. This is a machine at work. Take a tragedy, find a marginalized person connected to it, and make them the villain. It's cynical, it's dehumanizing, and it's effective. By weaponizing identity, they erase the truth, that this roommate acted responsibly, that they may have prevented further harm, and instead recast them as a symbol of everything the far right wants its base to fear. That distortion isn't just ugly, it's dangerous. It tells every trans American watching that even if you do the right thing, even if you help the police, you can still be turned into a target. Think about that for a moment. The only thing this roommate actually did, their entire contribution to this case, was cooperate with the authorities when they were thrust into a nightmare scenario they never asked for. They didn't plan, they didn't conspire, they didn't hide evidence. They answered questions, handed over messages, and tried to help investigators do their job. And yet, somehow, their very identity is being twisted into evidence of something far bigger, far darker, and completely imagined. What should have been a straightforward story of a bystander doing the right thing has been rebranded into a weapon of fear. Already, the administration and its allies are probing so-called trans-aligned groups, pretending it's about safety, pretending it's about preventing another tragedy. But listen closely, this isn't about stopping violence. It's about stigmatizing. It's about intimidating. It's about crushing organizations that exist only to provide refuge and support for marginalized kids, shelters, advocacy groups, mental health services, youth networks. These are lifelines for people who already live under constant threat, and yet they are being painted as hotbeds of extremism, as if compassion itself is a crime. This is scapegoating at its most dangerous. One individual's alleged actions are now being spun into a smear against millions of innocent people who share nothing but identity. It's the oldest political trick in the book. Find a vulnerable minority, tie them to a moment of violence, and let fear do the rest. And once the seed of suspicion is planted, it spreads. It justifies policies that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. It turns neighbors into informants. It makes every trans person, every ally, carry the weight of guilt for something they had nothing to do with. That's not justice. That's not protection. That is persecution, hiding in plain sight. And that's why this story is so terrifying, because it doesn't end with a single headline or a courtroom date. It radiates outward. It infects policy debates. It justifies new surveillance. And it becomes a pretext for punishing entire communities that had nothing to do with what happened. This is not theory. Watch how narratives work. A vivid image, a confession, a name, a relationship gets amplified, repeated, and then flattened into a single, terrifying slogan. Once that slogan exists, institutions bend to it. Lawmakers feel emboldened to propose sweeping measures. Agencies open investigations not because evidence demands them, but because political pressure rewards them. The administration isn't asking the hard questions about how political violence grows or why someone with access to guns becomes lethal. They aren't launching a real, sustained campaign to reduce the conditions that make these tragedies possible. What they want is simpler and crueler, a storyline they can use to rally a base, to strip rights, and to discredit organizations that offer help to people who are already vulnerable. I'll be honest, I didn't want to make this video because I am scared. I am scared for the roommate who did everything they could to cooperate. I am scared for advocates, counselors, and the small nonprofits that protect kids already under attack, who will now be smeared as part of some manufactured conspiracy. I'm scared for the millions of ordinary people who will become collateral damage in a political war that seeks easy enemies rather than real solutions. And that fear is exactly why we must push back with facts and context. This wasn't a coordinated campaign. It wasn't a movement. It was one isolated person with access to lethal weapons, with whatever private pathologies or grievances drove them. Reducing this to a communal indictment is dishonest and dangerous. The antidote is clarity and persistence. Insist on timelines. Insist on motive. Insist on primary sources. Highlight the difference between individual crime and collective guilt. Point to policy failures, lax gun access, unchecked online radicalization, the degradation of mental health care, rather than scapegoating identity. The more precise we are about what really happened, the harder it becomes for those in power to weaponize the tragedy. Facts blunt fear. Nuance slows the mob. Truth is our defense.